Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the People in Fundraising Professional Nonprofit Conversation Series. Today is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, and I am really delighted to welcome Mark Egge to our program. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Can't complain one bit. I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited to chat with you. I've been enjoying your series, and it'll be kind of fun to talk a little bit about what I've been up to. I a few months ago hung out my own shingle, and I'm now running Itasca Partners LLC, which is a small fundraising consultancy firm. Yeah.
Dynamite. That's great. I'd love to hear more about your consulting firm. And then, as always, we talk about other topics in this series. So thank you for your time today. And before we started recording, I admitted to Mark that I'm a big history geek. And I thought that perhaps the name of his company, Itasca Partners, had something to do with the U.S. vessel that was part of the search for Amelia Earhart on her solo flight. But Mark, please tell us where the name of your company, Itasca Partners, comes from.
Yeah, it just occurred to me too that the idea of a vessel searching for something very important would work for a prospect research type of consultancy. So I'm like, I think maybe I can actually steal that and use it, but that's not where it comes from. I don't care about ships or the Navy or anything like that at all. I grew up in northern Minnesota, close to a state park called Itasca State Park. And so that's where the name comes from. Lake Itasca is the source of the Mississippi River, which is by volume, I think it's the largest river in the country. But it's a big deal. It was always a big thing when I was growing up. Like, we'd take field trips up to Itasca every May, and then you can walk across these rocks, so you can cross the Mississippi River at this little space there, and inevitably there was always some knucklehead who fell in, and had to have a cold, wet bus ride back to back to town. So that's where it comes from.
Dynamite, thank you. Makes for a good story.
Sure.
So Mark, when did you launch Itasca Partners, please, and what was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so it was just in May when I went full time with the firm. I've actually been doing I've been moonlighting as a contract prospect researcher, prospect development consultant type, those types of jobs for almost 10 years now. Itasca Partners was officially incorporated in 2016, so it's been kind of like going along, just for quite a while. But it was just this spring that I decided to go all in on that. I was at Hamline University in an AVP role. I was working with a really great boss. He left. And then I was really kind of thinking about what do I really want to be doing? Who do I want to work for? Where do I want to be? And I said, I think I could make a go at this solo thing. So that's the adventure so far. The lights are still on. My kids are still being fed. So it's working so far.
That's awesome. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And as you think back, so it was incorporated 7 years ago and went public just a few months ago, so almost 6 months ago. Do you have moments where you thought, you wish you maybe had been able to start this sooner, or does it feel like this was the right time for you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. There's nothing where I'm like, boy, I really wish I had done this sooner kind of thing. It's just kind of the timing is what it is. And so it's the kind of thing where initially when I started, it was about like, I just needed to make some more money. My kids, were in daycare, and that is very expensive. And so I'm like, I got to do something, and I don't want to like work at McDonald's because, the pay isn't so good there.
Sure.
Getting better.
Right.
But still not quite like, I don't want to smell like French fries. So it was really just about the money stuff. And then eventually it really kind of turned into, oh no, this is a really fun way to work with a lot of different nonprofits, make a difference, bring the skills and talents that I have in a meaningful way. And so it was always on the side and kind of like, oh, a thing I could do. But then this spring, after I was just kind of like, it was just kind of like, yeah, I think it's time. I think I should take that leap and see what happens. So yeah, timing wise, it was like, yep, that's about right. That's fine.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
And where can our audience find you or information on Itasca Partners, please?
What a wonderful question, Tim. I wish I had prompted you for that myself. www.itascapartners.com. That's www.itascapartners.com. You're going to scroll that across the bottom of the screen,
Yes,
right? In
I plan
editing?
to.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, we need links. Right, and then we should do a subscribe down here thing and all that jazz, like the YouTubers do, or up here. I don't know where it is. We'll put the links in there. That's www.itascapartners.com.
Oh, well, and maybe your kids and mine can help with the marketing too, because my daughters are not yet into TikTok, thank goodness, but they're more into the social media than I am. So we can publicize this in more ways than just the video.
I can't wait to hit the preteen demographics. That's my target audience. A lot of buyers in there.
A lot of influencers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So speaking, you mentioned just joking about target audience. Talk to us about clients. Are you focused on certain segments of nonprofits and certain clientele, or what's the dynamic, please?
Yeah. I'm really fortunate that I've had a lot of experience in many different types of shops. And so there's sort of the space of what can I do and versus like, what am I like sort of targeting? And, in the what can I do space, it's, I'm taking all sorts of projects right now that are just interesting. Like right now I'm very data and reporting type heavy. Like I'm building out some crystal reports for one client. For another one, we've got a massive, like 3 huge data sets that they need to like stitch together and figure out how to do some analysis from. So it's really in that space. But, one of the things that I think is really valuable that I think to me is more sort of like the heart part of this is there are lots and lots of nonprofits out there that are, small, big enough to have people doing frontline fundraising for major gifts, but they don't need like a prospect researcher, right? Like it's not a good use of a full FTE. So sometimes they're going to go, all right, let's hire someone who can do the database and the prospect research or stewardship and research. And that's fine. But in a lot of cases, you're trying to hire someone for these different skill sets. And so those types of organizations are the ones that I'm really trying to reach with like retained prospect research, both in terms of you can spend a lot less money on, buying a package from me than you would get from having to pay for a full FTE, not to mention the databases, all the other things. And then also like I'm from Minnesota, so it's kind of hard to like say good things about myself, but I'll take that hat off for a little bit and say, I'm really good at research. Like you're going to get a really high expertise, high quality researcher working with me versus having to just hire someone and go, oh, now we got to train them. And, you may get them into a really great place, but I'm like, you can, pay a lot less money for really, really high quality research. And so that's sort of like where I'm targeting a lot of my marketing and, aiming with like who I'm trying to talk to and get in front of, because it's like these organizations are doing really great work. They need someone to help. They need, an extra boost in that space. They're spending money on major gift officers, and like, you don't want to waste that money, right? Like that's a lot of money going into that. How do you make the most of that? And I know that prospect research, prospect management is, one of the tools that can really accelerate that. So that's kind of where I'm focusing. It's interesting though, because I'm fine, any referral stuff that's coming my way. It's like, hey, could you do this? I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I could do that. And it's not, any of the stuff that I'm like trying to sell, quote unquote. But
interesting.
So that's kind of the range of it at this point.
Very cool. And I think also to your point about, the cost benefit analysis, you can hit the ground running as opposed to even for a seasoned prospect researcher onboarding at a new employer, there is trainings and mandatory stuff that they have to go through. And so, yeah, I mean, from day one, you are off to the races.
Yeah, it's definitely, yes. I mean, I've got a few clients that just they've kind of been in my portfolio for a while, and they just kind of surface and say, oh, we've got these 3 names, can you do this thing like you did before? I'm like, yep. And able to turn it around really quick for them.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to worry about, let's invite Fred to the meeting, make sure Fred is at the meetings. It's like, no, he doesn't have to spend any time in meetings. You don't need a Fred. Hire a Mark.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
I do want to pick up on you mentioned you're from Minnesota and it's hard to talk nice about yourself or compliment yourself. But I remember seeing you at the APRA conference in, I believe it was Nashville in 2016, and you were up on stage. All the members of the board of directors were on stage, and you made some reference to like a pocket swatch on your jacket. I don't know if you remember that, but I'm like,
yeah,
he's got a good taste and style, and you're also a really good researcher, so that's cool.
Tim, I really appreciate that, because my style, I've worked very hard on that, and most of the time it's not great. But that time I'm like, I'm going to be up on the stage. I'm going to get a pocket square, and it's going to match my socks, and it's going to be amazing. So I'm glad that made an impression. Good to know that whatever I said maybe didn't stick, but the pocket square, you're like, I remember that. I don't know what else you talked about. I'm just kidding, but that's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning of your career, Mark. So before Itasca Partners, and just tell us how you entered the nonprofit prospect development industry, please.
Well, when I was a little boy, I said, I really want to be a prospect researcher. I made that my dream, and I made it happen. That's how that went.
As you were skipping stones across Lake Itasca.
What do I want to do someday? I want to be a researcher. Everyone's always like, I just kind of fell into it. I think it'd be really fun if someone's origin story was, no, I really wanted to do this ever since I was a small child. Someday that may actually be the case, but unfortunately it was not for me. I didn't even so my education is in music. I have a couple of master's degrees in music theory and saxophone performance, and I was like, I'm going to be a professor, until I realized that I don't want to do that at all. Yes. But it was, thankfully, I was my wife was in grad school. I was we were living in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was working for a guy named Bill Brown, who he owned like a hotel. He had an insurance business. He had sold some land to Walmart. He owned a golf course. He had a small family foundation. He was on the board of trustees of the Indiana University Foundation. Spent a year there. I got fleas inspecting one of his properties after some tenants moved out. So I was like, I don't think this is a real great career path for me. But I'm going to go back to school was the idea, because I needed to get a doctoral degree if I wanted to teach music. Yeah. But I was just like, the fleas were kind of the last straw. Like I'm not doing this anymore. The Indiana University Foundation had an opening for a research assistant. And so I was like, oh, I could do that. And so I applied for it, and I got that job. And at some point I finally, I was just kind of like, okay, I want to be a music theory professor. How many positions like that are there in the United States, do I think? Like, let's say you're assigned jobs randomly. And I, crunch the numbers, and I'm like, oh, if jobs were randomly assigned, which they're not, I have a better chance of being a professional athlete, like in pro football or baseball or basketball, than being a music theory professor, much less wherever I wanted to be geographically. And I didn't even care about music theory that much. So I was like, I had to tell my wife, hey, maybe we change plans and I just do like this research thing. I think there's a career in that. Cool. And it turned out there was. So I kind of got my start there. Still in touch with some of the folks at IU Foundation who were, or just within the Indiana APRA ecosystem. Really great people. It was a really nice place to start. But yeah, that's where I kind of fell into it. And it was really that thing. Like, I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard of it. but I could do research. I did research for my master's thesis. Sure, let's do
Sure.
this.
Right.
It turned out great. It worked out. I feel good about it.
Oh, dynamite. And did you have a particular moment, Mark, or a project or a team where you felt that, this was the right decision, this was the right career path for you?
No.
Yeah.
No, there wouldn't that be bored? Just no. Next question. No, no, not really. I mean, it wasn't ever like an aha thing. I think some of it was just kind of, the realization like, oh, this is fun. This is fun, and there's a career path here, and this would be way easier than trying to work in higher education.
Sure.
I had, I mean, I think for me, I got really good encouragement along the way. Like, I was at IU Foundation for, I think, maybe 13 months. I mean, it wasn't a long time before we moved back to Minnesota, and I went to Carleton College and worked there for about 8 years. But even at IU Foundation, like the woman who was in charge of the research shop was like, boy, you've got a good head on your shoulders. You could be president of a chapter someday of APRA. And I was like, well, me? I don't know. So, that kind of encouragement, right? Like, people plant those seeds in your brain, and like, that's powerful. And then when I got to Minnesota, I started at Carleton, I was hired by a woman named Kathleen Foley, she was actually one of the founders of APRA. They began as the sort of Minnesota Prospect Research Association in the early 80s. And she, along with, several other people within the Twin Cities, were, integral to getting that going. And so it was really cool to work with her, because like, she knew so much. She was really she was visionary, but also like really understood all the past side of things, and just there was a deep history there. And people, when you're in Minnesota and you talk about Kath Foley, people are like, oh yeah, Kath Foley.
Awesome.
And she retired quite a while ago, still just a fantastic person, but she was really encouraging too. She said, look, you need to get on a committee with APRA Minnesota, and that's just really valuable. This programming committee needs some people. How about you want to do that? I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So that, that kind of like encouragement along the way, I think that fueled things a lot more than any sort of aha. But it was a nice alchemy of, I'm going, oh, I do okay with this. And I like this. And, it's great. And then you have that external stuff like, oh, this is going well for you. Keep doing it. Like, okay, I will do it. So.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for sharing that experience. And I'd love to have you talk now, Mark, going from like the local APRA chapter in your career to then serving on the APRA International board. Was that another, I imagine it was a boost in a way to be recognized by your peers. And what was that like?
Yeah. I know you're a little, I know, this will come out a little later, so maybe I'm not up to date. Have you interviewed other APRA presidents, for anyone who has been a president of big APRA?
No presidents yet, no.
Number one. Well, as the first guest of yours, who is a former APRA president, I'm old news there now.
Or something.
I know, right? Like, now, see, get your kids involved. They should do some graphics in there, like explosions. I mean, we got to spice this up, Tim. Come on, let's really zip it up. Well, yeah. Yes, it's part of the appeal of APRA for me. I have a big fragile ego. It's really bad. I like being up in front of people. I like, like being the center of attention sometimes. And so it, like, if you couldn't tell, and so, I mean, so like, to some extent, like, that was one of the things that was really cool. I mean, I remember 2007 sitting in the Chicago, at the APRA conference in Chicago, and seeing the board, people on the board going up at the front of the stage. And I'm like, man, what is to be like to be one of those people? Like, what is that like? And, and again, some of it was just kind of like, I want to be a big deal. you know, but early on I was like, that seems pretty cool. And
Yeah.
so you combine that with the encouragement that I was getting. It was like, oh, okay. I don't know if I ever really like realized, I put those two together where I'm like, yeah, it was kind of a perfect storm.
Mm.
Because a lot of it is like, the programming committee meeting for the state, chapter meeting or whatever is kind of like, oh, this is not glamorous at all, and not,
Right.
kind of not fun. It's kind of a grind. And
Yeah.
here goes, Janine talking again about this thing. And great, yeah, we get it, Janine. Your gift officers don't do contact reports, but we're here to talk about the conference.
Is
There's no
Fred in that
Janine.
meeting too?
No, Fred, he's got too many meetings at his job. He can't make it to APRA. Can't do it. Fred and Janine, no. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was the kind of thing where some of it is about giving back. There's those little ego things too. There's also like the connections and all that. But yeah, it's what was your question? I don't know. I got lost a little bit.
No, that's okay. So yeah, what was it like to be the president and to be, to become one of those people? You're up on stage and, how did, for that part of it alone, and then how did you, what was it like to make the time for such a senior volunteer leadership role?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think people are probably tired of hearing me say this whenever I'm talking anywhere, but like getting involved with APRA is the single best career decision I have ever made. And it's not from a career advancement perspective, although it played a role in that way because, the things that I got to do, like leading committee meetings or leading a chapter or leading board meetings, like I wouldn't get those kind of opportunities in my regular job. And for a lot of us in the prospect research space, we maybe don't have so much formal authority like that. So to have that experience of managing volunteers, setting the agenda, figuring out where are we going with this and what are we doing, like those were crazy good experiences to have. So from a career perspective, like, oh yeah, so great. But there's so many other things with it too, in terms of, the people you meet just in the APRA community are just really great, right? It's the sense of, oh, these are my people. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I can complain about my fundraiser not doing, contact reports. And there's someone here who goes, yeah, I know what you're talking about, right? Like we're swimming in the same water and like we speak the same language. And it's kind of, really fun to be at that conference every year and like, oh yeah, I say this thing and you know what I'm talking about versus the blank stares I get from my boss or whatever. So the community is huge, but then even in the space of like people who are giving their time and energy for this, they're a special kind of people, right? Like you have to be smart, you have to care, like if you're just in it for the glory or whatever that is, like it's not, you have to have some other motivators. And so the people who are wired in that way are really great people. And some of my favorite people on the planet are folks that I met through APRA. And so it's been the whole thing. And even if you don't go and serve in a big, on the board or in a huge leadership role or anything like that, the people you meet within that work they're great. I mean, it's just fantastic. And you're building out the network, you're making connections. And for me on a personal level, it was just kind of like, yeah, connecting with people, meeting people, building those relationships was huge and fantastic, which, that's some of, the talk I did back in 2016 at the Nashville conference for APRA Talks. I mean, that was what I was talking about there, right? Was the power of connection with other people within the workplace, especially. But to me, it's a, deeply personal and meaningful thing in terms of like just life. Right. And so APRA providing that as well was fantastic. I mean, just really, really fantastic. So, people are like, I don't know if I should volunteer for APRA. No, you should volunteer for APRA. Get involved, do some stuff, and you're going to get something out of it. So
definitely, and that resonates with me so much as well. Like I served on like some subcommittees of NEDRA for a while, and then Tim Enman, was on the board of NEDRA, and he's like, hey, I think we need another Tim on the board. And there's this joker at Harvard Business School, and I'm like, I know who's on the board. Like they're in kind of, as I've termed, rarefied air, and I don't belong in their company. But once you kind of break through that, and then I got involved with APRA committees as well, and you're right. It's so rewarding. The connections are so valuable. The people are dedicated, and it's very fulfilling. So
yeah, it's huge. And I get it. Like, of course, there's some reasons why people don't do it, but I'm kind of like, can't be a long list of like good reasons. Can't be a long list. Like, I don't know, I know there's good reasons to not, but also like a lot of good reasons too.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you for that series of responses to the first half of this conversation. I'd like to get your thoughts. You got the questions ahead of time. This next question may dovetail with what you just talked about with balancing work and APRA and everything else in life. There was a recent article quoting Laura Vanderkam, who in the title was, "There's a better way to reclaim your time than quiet quitting," which has been a trend for a while. And she argues that the opposite of burnout, which people definitely felt during the pandemic, isn't doing nothing or even scaling back. The opposite is actually engagement. And you just talked about that as well. And Laura goes on to say, as counterintuitive as engagement seems, adding energizing activities to your schedule just might make life feel more doable. When we put time into what we find energizing, our inner narrative changes. We no longer feel like life is a slog. And if you had a chance to read that full quote, anything come to mind for you about that?
Well, first I take issue with the author at her framing of this within the context of quiet quitting, because I'm kind of like, they're two different things. Like I can quiet quit at work and still be engaged and focused in other ways, right? Like I'm like,
yes.
No. This, you can't. They're not mutually exclusive. So if give me an opportunity to be contrary about something or talk about why it's dumb, I will take it, and that's why I'm like, she's dumb. That's dumb. But the thing, I mean, like, I've been for a long time really interested in positive psychology in whatever form. So like it started maybe 12 years ago. There was some lunchtime thing when I was working at Carleton where it was all about positive psychology. And this woman ran these, every other week meetings where we talk about a different topic of positive psychology. And then like after that, I like was involved with the positive psychology group. It's like, so I'm just kind of like, yeah, there's something we have control over our happiness and our sense of well-being and our fulfillment and everything. We don't have to just go like, maybe when I win the lottery, everything will be better, because turns out it won't.
It won't. Yes.
Some of the great philosophers of the 1990s would say, "Mo money, mo problems," which
there you go.
I think still true today. But so like, the idea of balance and engagement and those sorts of things, like to me, it really reflects, it ties in with, mindfulness is overused, I think, but, presence and intentionality.
Yeah.
Just the act of continually reminding myself that whatever I'm doing right now is what I'm doing right now. And, my brain might be coming in and trying to do these other things, but, you pull up some Eckhart Tolle, bring his, things into your, into your consciousness, and, all of the things that you are thinking are an illusion. You simply must focus on what you are doing.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle is the bomb. And so like, just, he's focused on this like presence and just, the Power of Now is his big book, and that one of his big books, which is just focus on like, all you have right now is the present.
Yes.
The past is just a story. The future doesn't exist. So all you have right now is the present. And so when you drop into that and you're focused on that in whatever way makes sense for you, you will be happier. You will be more, all these other things drop away. And so
yes, yeah.
To me, that engagement of I'm doing these things, I'm doing, and the we need the variety of different types of things, but the important piece is actually being tapped into it, connected into it, and focused on that thing. Because if I'm sure sometimes it's valuable to go for a bike ride and think, but for me, I find it way more recharging to be able to go on a bike ride and be on the bike ride,
Yes.
and Like I am right now, I am, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm hearing, versus thinking about Janine and Fred again with their complaints for the 15th time. And then I have to have an imaginary argument with them in my head. And I'm trying to enjoy the outdoors.
Oh man, I'm sorry they've been such a source of trouble for you.
Look, we don't need to get into that, but they might come up again. I don't know.
Maybe in the sequel to this conversation, we can dive into
Yeah, I mean, that might work out. That might work out.
But as you talked about, is it Eckhart Tolle?
Mm-hmm.
It just reminded me of the Vietnamese monk, and I apologize, I'm going to probably mispronounce his name, but Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah, and he passed away, I think, in 2022. And I have a good friend in my neighborhood who's into positive psychology and other really interesting literature and other meditation and other practices. And he told me about a famous quote that was from Thich Nhat Hanh, and said, if one is only doing the dishes, they should focus only on doing the dishes and try to drown out everything else and get to that point when all you're aware of is you are doing the dishes. And I think that intentionality and living in the present is sorely needed in our day and time.
Well, it's fundamentally anti-capitalist. I mean, if I'm focused on the moment, I don't want to buy anything, right?
Yeah.
And our society is hugely driven by capitalism, which has all sorts of problems with it, including in philanthropy. But yeah, so culturally, like, we are forced down this path of think about all these other things, think about what you want, think about the future, because there's no money to be made in enjoying the slicing of a cucumber. Like, that sense of this knife is so sharp and it just glides through, and look at how thin I could get and the smell and the sound of that, and even washing the dishes, right? Like, how does the soap feel? Like, what is the sound that I have here right now, right? There's no money to be made in any of that. So, like, nothing in our society is like pushing us towards that and helping us lean into that. In fact, it's doing all the opposite.
Yes.
But like, how deeply happy are we when we actually get into that space and go, there's nothing missing right now. I have everything I need. I have everything I need right now, and all I need is to wash the dishes. It's so great. It's so flipping great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can I say flipping? Is this an adult podcast?
Of course you can.
Okay.
Well,
good.
in fact, every time I post an interview on YouTube, there is a question: is this content appropriate or not for children? So you just scratched by there, Mark.
Woo. Gee golly.
Well, I'd love to, again, my brain kind of works on follow-up questions and trying to find tie-ins. This next question from the questionnaire, it's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it may tie into what you were just talking about related to intentionality and living in the present and being grateful for what is right in front of you. And we're recording in mid-October, Thanksgiving's coming up, so there are all those tie-ins. But Emerson once said that, quote, "I awoke this morning with devout thanksgiving for my friends, the old and the new." And so either as you looked through this questionnaire at the moment or in the present right now, who comes to mind as you hear that, and why do they come to your mind?
Well, not Fred and Janine.
Oh, good. We asked them.
There's an actual Fred and Janine out there. Like, have I met him? Do I know him?
What did I do to Mark?
There's a lot of shade from this guy. Jeez. It'd be terrible if there was actually someone they're literally Janine or whatever, and they're like, "Why are you talking about me like that, Mark?" Yeah, it's the There's no reason to like name names. I'm not gonna name names, Tim. It's not that kind of a podcast.
Okay,
Except
that's
for
fine.
Fred and Janine. But yeah. But no, like it's an interesting question from the perspective of like thinking of the old and the new, and the thankfulness for friends. I think for me this resonated a little bit when you sent it, because I'm like, yeah, for in terms of what do social connections and friends mean to me in a bigger sense. It's become a very deeply spiritual sort of thing, which I don't want to like overstate it or anything, or you're like, oh, but
Right.
it's there's something really sort of holy or bigger than ourselves about connecting with other people, and
Yeah.
just having those little moments of connection where we're just talking, right? And to me, those little magic moments of two people just being able to sit and talk and just be right there together in that moment, creating a little piece of art that is that conversation, whatever that is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's gone. There's it's ephemeral, like everything, right? It's you've only got it for a moment and then it's gone, and that's the way the everything works.
Yeah.
That to me is what like friends are about. And I've been doing a lot of like work to figure out like how do I get more of that in my life? How do I build
Mhm.
that into my life? How do I have that? And it's interesting thinking about my time with APRA, for example. Like being on the board and being president was a very intensive, like that's a very intensive experience to go through with other people. That was a really important part of my sort of social network and fabric and all that.
Yeah.
And when you're the president and you leave, I mean, you're the president, you get elected president, you go president elect, president, immediate past president, and then goodbye. You're not
Right.
on the board anymore. They cast you to outer darkness. They're like, maybe you can come to the conference, like, or maybe there'll be a pandemic and you're going to sit in your basement, which
And there'll
that's
be
what happened to me.
and there'll be a lot fewer little stickers on your lanyard. It's not like 4 and 5 rows of.
Look, I walked around with old lanyards, at home during the pandemic. My wife she didn't get it. She's like, "Take that, you look dumb." I'm like, I do not look dumb. I look like a big deal. But yeah, that's the other thing. I haven't actually been to an in-person conference because I think the shame of being, shorter lanyard. I think you could though. You could like take old ones and like just add on and just be like, I'm still a big deal.
That's right.
Could work out.
Hey, I'll
But
I'll join I'll join you in Seattle with my short lanyard phobia too. Next
okay,
year.
that sounds great. Or you could just get one little thing that just says not a big deal.
There you
Then
go.
so what's your thing that says I'm not a big deal? I just like you just play it too cool for
That's right.
lanyards. You're like, oh, I don't need that.
Or it just says move along.
My eyes are up here, Tim. My eyes are up here. Yeah, I mean, right. So missing the conference, the lanyards, all that stuff. But coming off the board, I'm going, oh, I don't see these people on the regular anymore.
Yeah.
And like I had to go to therapy and talk about that. Like,
Mm.
like my therapist, like, you seem sad. I'm like, well, I'm not on the thing anymore. It's like, okay, well, we got to talk about that and figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it is a thing where I'm like, oh yeah, this matters. The connection of friends, the connection of people fulfills me in a lot of different ways. And one of them is just like on a spiritual thing where I'm kind of like, I don't need church, but boy, I really need my one-on-one conversations with my friends. Like that's
Yes.
that's my spiritual experiences that I have, because it is
Mm.
just it is such a gift. It's such a huge privilege to be able to sit down with people who are lovely and amazing, and have those, they're sharing their time and their presence with me, and I'm like, hot diggity, that's great. So
Yeah.
that's what that makes me think of.
That's a
Ralph
lovely.
Waldo Emerson. His thing would say poet, and what else? He'd have to do like poetry on his little ribbons,
That's
wouldn't
true.
he?
You would.
Like those refrigerator magnets, but with the little ribbon things.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Now we're on. That's what they need to do. Like you can make full sentences. Like you could just you like put them all together.
That's right. Yes.
Big deal committee chair of the. You know, we can sell those.
I like this. We got a business opportunity here.
Brilliant.
But in all seriousness, that was a lovely answer. I feel like
Thanks.
as you were talking, Mark, I was thinking of an Arthur Brooks quote. and he is a spiritual person. He joined the Catholic Church in adulthood, and he talked recently about his belief that each of us have, I don't want to butcher the quote, but something to the effect that we have a divine identity or divine journey, and we're all here at this particular time to make of it what we can and to help each other. And for me, that resonated a lot as well. So
That's beautiful. I love that.
I think that is that sort of, whether it's small C or big C church or spirituality or whatever else we want to tie it to, we're all here in this one moment. So
yeah. I mean, right, like that. Yeah, it's just one of the things that I think sometimes it's we're just not stopping to think about that so much. And there is the appreciation of like, oh, we exist. And sometimes I'll just, I've got some friends I'll just text and be like, we live at the same time in all of history. 14 billion years and infinite space. And we could have been anywhere at that point, but we're both right here right now. Like,
oh, yes.
Like, we're not stopping to think about that. It's just ridiculous. I mean, even just escape. Geologic time, forget geologic time. That's like, clicking a stopwatch for 30 seconds. That's nothing compared to like all of space time. You're talking about the 14 billion years and whatever. I'm like, it's ridiculous. Why aren't we talking about this more? Why aren't people just like losing their minds about this?
Seriously.
Going, what? Like, you know how fast we're like rotating on the earth and how fast it's moving around the sun? And we're just kind of like, I feel sad about this Netflix show. Like, what? What? Look up. Come on. It's just kind of a lot of wonder. So
and I love the Carl Sagan 1970s Cosmos. I don't know if you've ever watched that. I mean, it is, talk about blowing your mind.
The Neil deGrasse Tyson reboot of that from, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, like that first episode, he's like, if you take all of time and put it on a calendar year, like, all of recorded history is the last half second of the year. Like, what?
It is awe-inspiring and also, again, mind-blowing. Boggles me to think that way.
I can't think about it too much. I'll get a panic attack, but
well, Mark, we have about 5 minutes left in our episode, and this conversation will air in early 2024. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Are there any goals or objectives you intend to work for in the new year to come? Because again, this conversation will air probably in January or February. So anything you want to impromptu share?
I was hoping to solve global warming.
Okay. Yeah.
It's feeling hard right now, though.
Okay.
So my therapist says that I'm aiming a bit high, putting too much into that basket. So I said, well, what about the two-party political system and the current state of democracy in America?
There you go.
And my therapist said, that's also a bit much.
Okay. Your Twins just broke their 18 game postseason losing streak. Big round of applause. I'm sure you had a lot to do with that. So
there was a lot of shouting in the house. My wife is a huge Twins fan, and like I'm fine with them, but she's like, you should be more excited about this. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's been 20 years since they got to this point in the playoffs, and now here they are. And like a classic Minnesota team, what they do is they get our hopes up and then they dash them. So what's happening right now is they've won one game on their best of 5 series against the Astros, and they just lost at home 9-1 yesterday. So no, Tim, thank you for reminding me of another colossal disappointment besides the vastness of oblivion and death. That is the Twins. Come on.
I try to elevate my guests, Mark. What can I tell you?
Yeah, elevate me and then you drop me. Well, so I mean, right? Like these things are futile to put any like sometimes goal stuff. I'm kind of like, get out of here. Who cares? Right. Like I'm like, I don't know. Like I could walk out of my front door and get hit by an Amazon delivery truck later. I don't know. What's the point of making goals? So there's some sense of like, I'm not worried about that. So to, there's a little bit of a dodge to the question there, right? Like, the twins are always going to do what they're going to do. Whatever's happening with the environment is going to happen. I just need to be right here.
Yeah.
Worst podcast guest ever.
No, I love the horrific.
I'm very much dodging because I'm like, I don't know. I don't necessarily have, goals. I think, there's really boring stuff where I'm like, I have revenue goals for my consulting business, and so I'm like, I need to make this much money to pay for these things and and so sure, there's some of that stuff. But no, I don't have any like, I've just got those numbers where I'm kind of like, this would be awesome. This would be good. This would be, we're doing okay. And if I can do that, great. But that's as close as I get to any real goals. I mean, I think a lot of other stuff is just like, oh yeah, how do I keep working on living a good life and just being in a place of happiness, So
that's refreshing for me to hear because I'm the opposite. And then I inevitably, like, third week of January, I'm back to eating, vanilla Oreos with 4 cups of chocolate milk. And
what's
then
the problem with that?
It's this like sort of an escalator going down of my goals, just seeing them wither so that by St. Patrick's Day, I'm pretty much a hopeless middle-aged dad and husband again, just shuffling through existence.
You say that like it's a bad thing. This is what's inevitable. This is what's happening to us. Why fight it? Oh, this resistance to what's really happening. It's ridiculous. I mean, right? Like, I always love having both ideas, right? Like on the one hand, I'm like, why bother? Just stay cool. But I also know that, like, I for a while there was stuff where I'm like, I need some healthier habits in terms of like exercise and alcohol consumption and self-care and all those sorts of things. And I'm like, let's gamify it and I'll have a system. And so I got into it and I was feeling great and I was loving it. And then I just kind of fell off the wagon. And I'm like, I can sit here and kick myself for not doing it, but I can also go, well, that's just what's happening right now, and you felt better when you were doing those things, Mark, so maybe come back. And so it's like, okay, well, I'll do this one thing, like, okay, that's good, so it's the sense of achievement and not just, again, capitalism. I'm not here for it. I don't no right? So just let's look at incremental, like, one doing this thing is better than not doing it, so I'll do this thing. Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah, it gets back to what you were saying earlier about, and you just mentioned capitalism again, but like, everything has to be monetized, everything has to be super efficient, and it's like, no, I don't. I'm just gonna go off on my own and do my thing.
No, I mean, the dream, I think, life goals is buy a shack in Montana, grow a beard out to the extent that I can, write letters to newspapers, tinker with some things, send people packages, seems like a good plan, right? Well,
everything old is new again. Speaking of Itasca, my younger daughter just turned 15, and I named her Amelia after Amelia Earhart. And my wife's like, who is that? Like, this is what happens when you have a Utah public education in the 1990s. You just don't learn these things. But again, everything always new again. She asked for a record player and LPs for her birthday on Sunday. And I'm like, it all comes back. So write those letters, pick it outside your local official's office. Make your own bread and turn on the LPs.
Everything old is new again.
Yeah,
it's true. I didn't think to go there, but I really like that. I like that a lot. How hang on, hold up. You were like, let's name our daughter after this woman who goes missing and is never found again. Help me understand. Like your wife was like, yeah, that's cool. That sounds good to me. How'd you sell her on that?
Well, okay, before we had kids, we actually watched the I'm blanking on her name. She was a $1 Million Baby, and then she was in a movie about Amelia Earhart
Oh,
and
yeah.
Hilary Swank.
Yeah.
And so we're like, I don't know, 3 months into married life, and we're in this apartment in outside Boston watching the movie. And I kind of thought that, most people know what happened to Amelia Earhart. So the movie ends with a shot from the cockpit of the plane, and the Pacific Ocean just is rising up toward the plane. And then the credits roll. And my wife looked at me and was like, so what happened? And she's
Well, there
gonna
was
kill
this
me.
ship called the Itasca, first of all.
That's right.
www.itascapartners.com.
If she ever watched a single one of these episodes, she would kill me for going public with that story. But I've always liked the name Amelia. It comes from like some old archaic German word that means hardworking or industrious, and I just like the name. And
That's a much better sell than, hey, this tragic story
that's right.
about someone meeting an untimely end.
But I liked it because also like it was, yes, tragic ending, but also inspiring story to get to that point.
It's true. That's true.
From the heartland of America, from Kansas, and was told that she couldn't do these things just because she was a woman. So that's where I was going with there.
Yeah. It's great that you're not putting any pressure on your daughter. You're just, like, here, let me give you this great name with huge expectations. I named you after this person who's really, really important, but you just, live life. Just do you. Or Amelia. Yeah, I named my kids Millionaire and President. So, I mean,
there you go.
And they both talk like this. It's terrible. Sorry. No. Cut that out. We can't. That's just, gross. Sorry. My wife's going to yell at me. Did you do a Donald Trump impression? Maybe a little. Sorry. Nobody likes it.
I've got to say, Mark, as I'm listening and watching to you, I think you may have a case for identity fraud, because some of your mannerisms and some of your vocal styles remind me of Jim Gaffigan. I don't know if you know that comedian. Like
Hot Pocket.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing. You're
really about the
dropping
food.
your voice, and yes.
Oh yeah, sure. No. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, right? Like we're all just doing impressions of whatever. Like I'm just you could probably take like all the things I said and be like, oh, he stole this from this person. He picked this up from this person. Like it's all from somewhere else. So,
Sure.
I mean, neat that you thought of, a big professional comedian guy. That's neat. But I'm also like, well, clearly you need to mix this up, Mark, because it's now people are just going to think it's theft. Daniel Tosh does some of that stuff too.
That's what I'm saying. He's stealing from you.
He's stealing from me.
Yeah.
He came first, but and his career broke before mine did.
Oh, well, he's never been on a stage in Nashville in front of hundreds of prospect development people.
Yet. It's a challenge to the programming committee. Get Jim Gaffigan as the keynote.
There you go. Well, Mark, this has been a really fun, enjoyable. Literally my jaw hurts from laughing. I don't just say that. I've loved this time with you. And so thank you for the wit, the humor, the personality you've brought to the program. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you. The thing about working in being a solo, doing your own thing, I don't have any coworkers. Like I've been saving up all sorts of funny little things for months. So it's fine. It's good to have somewhere to use them. I mean, it's too bad it's going to go out on the public. I got to come up with new stuff. It's not like you hire someone new and you're like, hey, they haven't heard this joke before. But no, it's great. I really appreciate you asking me to be here, and this was a fun conversation. So thank you for inviting me. It was a real treat. www.itascapartners.com.
Absolutely. That'll go in the comments on LinkedIn as well.
Because capitalism.
That's right. Let's monetize this.
There you go. There you go.
It's all about
no, but
and
thank you.
eyeballs.
This is super fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that you do make it to the conference in Seattle next year. I haven't been. Well, Nashville was my last conference.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, because then I moved out here in 2018, worked for a healthcare nonprofit that, I'll be diplomatic. They wanted people more to go towards AHP and drive us more in that direction, which made sense. But it was like AHP or APRA, and I'm like, well, APRA is my peeps, really. But
yeah.
So
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you got to get to Seattle.
I am overdue. Yes.
Yeah. It's got to be an easy flight too, from
It
Utah
is.
to
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, I hope to see you there.
Sounds good. I'll be on the lookout for your long list of ribbons, or just one that says "Move along." Move along.
And if you do grow your beard out, I'll have to look just for your ribbons as well, because it may not be. Yeah.
Well, the sad secret though is I haven't shaved in 2 months, so
Okay.
I wasn't born with your manly genetics, Tim.
Oh.
I got baby face disease.
Yeah, this is my Scottish, Northern English, and Irish all coming through here, and I keep threatening to shave it off.
Don't. It's classic. Like, you could make a little icon thing out of this for, like, that's part of your look. Like, you got to have that. You can't shave it. It's part of the Tim Wilson brand.
I like that. We're gonna monetize that.
Yeah, money.
Well, hey, I've kept you for almost an hour and a half, so thank you for your time today, Mark. And you're
well worth it.
Well, thank you. And your conversation will go live sometime in early 2024. I'm going to take a little pause because I don't want to get burned out again like last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, look for it. I'll be in touch with you specifically when it'll drop. And then for my audience, you can find Mark's conversation on YouTube and LinkedIn. And thank you everyone for your support of this initiative. It's just like, in a way, it's like Mark, one-man operation, spending a lot of time just in my own head, not talking to a lot of people. So that's why I do this as well. So
I love it. I might steal a page from your playbook, Tim.
Please do.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, everyone. And we'll be back with another episode very soon.